Thanks for joining us today for this week's live Q&A. We've got a bit of a rainy day here, and looking at this hive from the outside, it looks like there's not much going on. Now we're in our early spring here, or almost in spring here in Australia, so the theme is being prepared for spring. Now, you could be forgiven looking at this hive to think there's no bees in it at all. So let's do an inspection and see what's going on inside. Now, starting from the outside of the hive, you can have a look at the landing board and you'll notice there's no bees coming in and out. So we have to take into account that it is a rainy day and it has been a very cold night. So the bees are likely responding to that, and they decided not to get out of bed this morning. Now, if you've got questions, put it in the comments and we will get to answering those. Now, looking in the window, you've got a typical thing where in the wintertime you get some condensation on the window. Notice that there's honey in half of the frame and not in the other half, and the condensation's only on the half where there's no honey. And that's because the honey acts as a thermal mass, and it's quite important to a hive to have that thermal mass. And when it's empty, the thermal mass isn't keeping the window warm as opposed to this side. So this side's cooler because there's no honey behind it, and you're getting precipitation of the moisture dropping out of the air and on to your plexiglass here. So that's interesting in itself. Now, condensation is normal when it's cold, and because the bees are keeping the hive at a known humidity, usually around 50 to 70% relative humidity. So that moisture is in the air, and as soon as it touches cold surfaces, it will precipitate. Now, you've got a bit less insulation on the window, but you will find even on the walls of beehives, and you often just can't see it because you don't have a window. Now, in those colder climates, it is a good idea to insulate under the roof so you get less of this forming on the underside of the inner cover. And we like to have the inner cover as a wooden surface so it can absorb some of the moisture, and it's less likely to have those drips falling down onto the bees, which isn't a good thing. But condensation on the walls of the hive can actually be a good thing when the bees can't fly and collect their own water. They can actually use some from the walls of the hive. Today we're talking spring prep. Now, we're a bit early here, but we want to get ahead of the curve in Australia and inspire people to get out there, do their spring prep. So we'll get in there and have a look. Interestingly enough, I've taken the window off. You're starting to see some bees coming up to see what is going on, but it does look like this colony is quite weak. So we're going to get in there and make sure they've got a good laying queen. What do you think of your questions? We'll give you another demonstration of the super lifter. If you haven't seen that, it's my father and I's invention that allows you to easily open the hive compared to chiseling off the box and doing it the old way and taking the heavy weight. So a little bit of smoke in the hive. They seem pretty chilled this morning. I'll leave the smoker there. In fact, some parts of Australia, we've got a rainy day here, but some parts of Australia are in a drought. It's a fire-prone time. Make sure you're being responsible. If any embers fall out, at least they'll be trapped here. And your smoker is hot when it's really going. We don't want to be setting fire and creating a grass fire around your hive. Garbage bin lid is good for that, and also putting a smoker inside the garbage bin and closing it afterwards is good in those fire-prone areas. If you've got questions, put them in the comments. Trace will read those out as we go. So here we have our super lifter. Now, good idea at this point to put on your bee suit, get yourself protected. If you're new to beekeeping, wear your gloves, because what you'll find is the hive is so easily opened with this product, it'll be open before you know it. Okay. Now this super lifter invention, my father and I worked on for a good part of 7 years, and just kept refining and refining. Now we've refined it to a very easy to use contraption that fits in a little bag like this. You simply pick it up by these handles, spread your hands apart, it sets itself up for you. You then connect it onto these lower load point screws like that, and roll the upper brackets onto the upper ones. Now, at this point, as soon as I lift this, which is really quite easy to do, it's going to be doing that what was once hard work of separating the boxes. So we used to do that with the chisel tool. You can hear that the propolis is cold this morning, and it's snapping and crackling as we open our hive. But that was just very easy. I just did it slowly, but you can do that very quickly. And you've got 2 leg extensions here for if you need to put it up higher. Let's say you're using double box or you've got a bit of a slope, we've got a 3-stage telescoping leg there for you. Next is as simple as just rolling it over, which we are getting so much great feedback. Now, sometimes you will find they will stick it all together, and you may still need to chisel it a little bit, but most of the time not. Away you go, just like that. And there you have it. We're at that point which once took a lot of effort to get to. So it's getting rave reviews, a lot of really touching reviews, or people writing in saying how it's changing the game for them. They can keeping bees into their later years, and others saying, look, even if you're strong, you really benefit from this device just because of ease. And it also makes a nice little stand for you, so your box will just sit there while you go about your beekeeping. Okay, so this is the queen excluder, which some people don't use, but we do recommend it just to take the risk out of the queen laying in your honey super. Some queens will, some queens won't. Always a good idea, have a little look there for the queen. And then, just in case you missed her, lean it up against the hive so at least she has a chance of getting back in herself. So here we are in the brood nest, and straight away I'm looking at it going, oh, they actually look fine, even though from the outside of the hive I wasn't seeing much activity. It's simply because it's a very cold, rainy day, and we're still just before our spring here in Australia. So spring prep, what you need to be thinking about if spring is around the corner for you is making sure there is space for the queen to lay. If everything's full of honey, for instance, down here, there's nowhere for the queen to lay and the bees are really building up, then you might find that the hive will swarm. So a lot of spring prep is about limiting the chances of your hive swarming, which is their natural division, where half of the bees will push out the old queen, fly away and find a new place to set up shop, and your hive usually raises another queen. But that really weakens your hive, and it's just a little bit poor practice as a beekeeper, letting your hives swarm off everywhere and bother your neighbours and so on. So we want to get in here, make sure there's space for the queen to lay. And there's multiple ways to achieve that. You could add more boxes, you could take a split, which is my favourite go-to method, and we showed you that a couple of weeks ago. Or you could just take some frames away from the edge or some honey away from the edge, enjoy that honeycomb, put the empty frames back in the middle. And that's the technique we're going to be showing you today. And that way you give the brood nest some fresh area for the bees to build their comb and the queen to lay, and that'll limit that primary swarming trigger. Okay, using a bit of smoke, let's choose a frame to pull out and make sure we've got a happy, healthy hive here with a laying queen. Now, I always have a look down, make sure I'm pulling one out that's going to come up easily without breaking comb, because the first one's the most challenging. Always go sideways first, just by sticking the chisel end between the frames and making sure you're cracking the propolis between the end bars. Otherwise you'll tend to pull your frame apart. Okay, and up we go. The bees look like they're putting up with me on this rainy day. Not a great time for beekeeping. Warm sunny day, mid-morning to mid-afternoon is a better idea, but the things we do for the camera. Look at that. That is actually beautiful. This hive's going to absolutely explode. Look at that beautiful brood pattern there. The queen's done a great job of filling all these cells with eggs, and we've got a lot of capped brood. Every single one of these is going to emerge into the hive as a fluffy little baby bee ready to take on the many chores. Now, if we want a really good look at it, we should really shake the bees off. But before doing that, I'm going to have a quick look for the queen, in case she's right here on this frame. We know she's there because we're seeing a nice frame of brood. Any questions coming in?
Yes, Ed, I just got someone asking, we're using the super lifter. What's the difference between the standard kit and your extension kit on the super lifter?
Okay, the standard kit is exactly what you see here, which is just your super lifter, and it really suits the person who is just using a simple setup like this with a single brood box and a single super. And if you want to get the extra kit, what do you call it, Chase?
What?
The standard kit.
Oh, the extension kit.
The extension kit, okay. Then what you're going to be getting is these handles here, which make it even easier to lift the hive and become essential when you are doing double box lifts, unless you're very strong. So basically when you're rolling over a double box 10 frame full of honey, you've got a lot of weight there, and these handles make it easier to do. They just click together like that, and I'll show you what they do. They connect onto the load point screw. We've tried to standardize it so you've got the same load point screws in the center of all your deep boxes, and over you go, and all you have to do is spin up this nice brass wing nut with its little bee wings, and you've got a great handle there, which becomes important when you've got a really heavy double box, or if you're not that strong in your arms, you'll even appreciate it with a single box lift as well. So added extras there. You've also got the carry case, which is a nice thing to have, and it's got a shoulder strap so you can walk out. It's a very nicely built case here, made to handle your extension kit with your handles and your super lifter here. It's also got nice side pockets, so you can put in here your load point screws for when you need them, and a nice little strap to go over your shoulder. So looking at that, now what I've done here is I've leant the frame up against the super, which I couldn't see the queen on that frame, but not a good idea because the queen could wander straight into the hive, into the super, which is not where you want her. Now, we didn't attach our frame rests, but we could, and then this would rest right on the side. What I'm going to do here is shake off these bees so you can get a really good look at that brood pattern. So diagonally across like this, good shake, and now you can actually get a much better view of what's going on the frame. Look at that, beautiful brood. We've got some young ones down here. Give us a thumbs up if you can see the glistening larvae just above my finger here. So they spend about 8 days in that larvae stage, that's like their caterpillar if you like, and then they spin a silk cocoon around themselves, the bees cap it off, and you've got capped brood, or the pupae. Here they go through their metamorphosis and come out with their wings, their legs, their eyes, everything they need to be an extraordinary little worker bee in a very complex and amazing hive we call a beehive.
So you've just got, while you're holding that frame, because Jaycel's wondering, she's spotted that, wondering at the bottom of that frame that she can see either a swarm cell or an emergency cell.
Well done. It's amazing the observation out there. So that's it there, just starting to build a queen cup, which the bees will use for a swarm cell or emergency cell. Basically they're all the same thing. It's a queen cup just in case they need to raise a new queen, and they'll often be doing that a lot in the springtime, preparing to do the natural thing of division, with half the bees heading off to set up a new location, whether that be a cavity in a tree, a wall, mailbox, you name it. The bees are looking for a nice sized cavity for the swarm to move into. So nicely picked up. Let's see if there's any on the other side. Here's an old one that's been torn down. It's not in use. Some beekeepers will go around smashing them off. Doesn't usually help that much in my opinion, but the concept there is you're trying to limit them from raising a new queen and swarming. I find it best just to relieve the congestion by taking a split from the hive, or taking some comb away from the bottom, or adding some new boxes full of empty comb. Okay, it's a beautiful thing. I'm going to lean that up there, and we're just interested to see, starting our spring, how the hive's going. If you're in the colder areas of the country, then you might find you'll be doing your checks to see whether your bees have survived through the long cold winter, and if they have a queen and a little colony, sometimes you might want to nurse them into good strength ahead of the honey season by feeding them up on some sugar water to really get them going. Around here there's always something flowering, so we don't tend to worry about that. And we actually get some good honey through the winter, although this year we didn't. Not a whole lot of honey this winter. We had a lot of rain instead. Now here's the drone brood. Have a look at that. They're sticking out like mounds. Very easy to tell between worker brood and drone brood. I'll shake the bees off so you can have a look at that too. And we've got a lot of bees on the comb, which is good to see. Looking from the outside, you couldn't necessarily know that this hive was doing well inside, and it's simply because it's a very cold, rainy day. And these bees have a calm temperament. Some hives will really kick up a bit of a fuss if you pull them apart on a cold, rainy day. Now, talking about cold, it's a good idea not to take out open brood from the hive if it's below 15 degrees C. At least not for very long, because they can get a cold shock and that young larvae can die. That's one of the reasons why it's always recommended go on a nice warm sunny day to do your brood inspections. Any more questions?
Yes, it's a few people are asking, I guess, for our winter, how do we look after the bees through winter, and how come we don't take off the super box?
Okay, we don't really get a winter here as far as the European honeybee is concerned. It's sometimes we have times where there's not a whole lot of nectar, but never none. So the bees are always able to look after themselves by collecting the nectar, which is their carbohydrate, and the pollen, which is their protein. So that way we don't need to change the configuration of the hive. We can leave it like this all year round. And other people in similar subtropical regions will be able to do that too. In the colder climates, where you've got long, cold, potentially snowy winters, it is typical to reduce the size of your hive, make it a bit easier for the bees to look after that hive during the winter. So it's typical in those colder times to stack a few more boxes on. You might have 3 or 4 boxes on your hive, maybe double brood, maybe double super, up to you. And then you might take one of them off or 2 of them off to reduce it down to something more this size for a long cold winter. And it'll just increase the chances of their survival, making sure of course that you have enough honey stores for your hive to survive a long cold winter if that's what you get in your climate. Chime in, let us know in your climate how much honey you need to leave on your hive for the bees to survive the winter. Always a good question to ask your local beekeepers. So this frame's interesting. What you've got here is the cell size morphing from a 5.3 millimeter size typical worker bee cell through to just over 6 millimeter size cell here for the drones. And you can see, give us a thumbs up if you can see that cell size there being bigger than here. And you can also see this is worker brood, this is drone brood. So these are the male bees underneath that capping, and it's typical in the springtime to get a lot more males because their job is to spread the genetics around. So they will be emerging into the hive, taking off each day, flying to a drone congregation area, hoping that a virgin queen is going to fly past and it'll be one of the lucky drones to mate with a queen.
Fantastic. Seeds, now Noel is up in Brisbane, which is only a few hours north of where we are, just getting ready to start beekeeping in a few weeks. Just wondering about the best spot for the hive. They've got like full sun or under a large tree with a clear flight path that the sun gets under in the winter. So full sun or some shade for the winter.
Okay, very nice. If you've got hotter summers like you do, then I would say the very best thing would be, the ideal would be some nice shade, particularly in the afternoon in the summer, but the rest of the year you've got sun coming in. So at my place I've got a whole lot of hives just under a tree line where in the winter the sun all comes in and beats on the hive, and in the summer they get a bit of shade, particularly in the afternoon, and that will assist your bees. However, bees are really good at cooling their hive, and if you've got a choice between full shade or full sun, always go full sun because it'll help keep things like chalk brood away, which do thrive when it's damp and moist. So keeping your hives in the sun is good, or some afternoon shade in summer, ideal. However, as backyard beekeepers, we often have a different hierarchy of decision making when it comes to situating your hive. And one of those is the flight path of the bees. So that's probably one of the key things, is you don't want to have one of these with the flight path just coming straight out to where people are walking by. Otherwise you get accidental stings from bees going into people's hair and so on. So make sure your bees can get up and away in a place where they're not bothering anybody. And that's probably number one. And the next is going to be summer and shade, whether you want to protect them from your pets and so on.
Fantastic, Seeds. Em's wondering, where do we get our queens from? Because our bees seem exceptionally calm.
Look, we have hives that are grumpy and we have hives that are calm, and everyone's a bit of a different temperament, and different days will often change. I knew this hive was calm, that's why I decided to do this one on a rainy day, but there's another hive down there that I know would be very aggressive in this situation. So you'll get to know your bees, and whether you decide to requeen, to change the genetics to nice calm bees, will depend on your appetite and those around you, and whether you can handle those genetics that are more aggressive. But it is a joy to be beekeeping with bees that aren't trying to sting you. Now, as far as ordering queens go, we always get them from local breeders when we need to. We're often just raising our own which you're gambling on the genetics of the virgin queen and who she mates with. She might bring back some aggressive traits from drones down the road, or she might find some nice gentleman drones that have calm genetics like this. You never know, but we often will be doing walk-away splits, letting them raise their own, and we simply, if we get an aggressive hive that we're unhappy with, we will take that queen away and buy one in, or let them raise another one and have another go at getting a nice calm genetics. I used to really keep bees that were very aggressive, and I had it in my head that that was good because it helped keep pests away and so on, and I've come to believe that's not actually true, and that you're better off keeping nice calm bees.
Great. Seeds, Aurak's saying, just got a few problems with the roof, just wondering about the attachment that we use to keep the roof on, I guess the wing nuts on the side. Aurak's saying once he attaches it to the cover and the super, that he's finding it's damaging the hive. Is there any tips on using those wing nuts on the roof?
The reason why you get damage is if you forget and you're ripping the roof off with them wound in, and you get that scratch mark, which is annoying. I actually find for the most part you don't need to use them. The roof will just sit there fine. Particularly when we redesigned this roof, we gave it a larger telescope, and even in quite strong winds it stays right on. So you only really need to use them if you've got a very windy scenario. And even here with the super lifter, I'm just careful as I rolled it over that the roof didn't fall off, and it's fine. So I guess my major tip is you probably don't need to use them as much as you are, and particularly when you take it off, if you have used them, make sure you've wound them out so they're not putting a big mark in the side of your box. Today we are just checking in on this hive. We're in our early spring, we're talking spring management, we're getting ahead of the curve. One of the things we're going to need to be doing is making space for the queen to lay. So I've already had a look, and this hive's looking great despite the look from the outside. Now we keep pulling out frames and having a look, and there's another one with a bunch of brood on it, so we like that. And there's other ones that are looking really good, like this one down here. Nice clockwork brood pattern across it. The queen's a keeper, and it's simply a matter of waiting for the season to turn, and we should get some nice honey stores. Now, this all looks very good. One method of, if you're looking for a queen, you've got bees all kind of balled up like that, you can blow on them just like this, and they'll tend to part for you if you are trying to find the queen. We don't necessarily need to find her. We've seen lots of evidence, like you see here, of that young larvae down the cells showing we've had a queen laying recently. But it's fun to practice your queen spotting skills. Okay, so what I'm interested in doing is seeing if we have any frames on the edge we can cycle right out and put the frames back in the middle. Now, moving the bees out of the way and then levering the frames apart, let's have a look and see what is going on this one right on the edge. And if it's only honey, we can seize that moment to cycle that frame out. And with naturally drawn comb, it's quite an easy process because you don't need to have a pre-prepared foundation frame. You can keep everything. I like to keep all of the hive components in the hive if possible. It saves what I used to have, which is a shed full of equipment and wax moth and annoyance. Now we strive to just keep it simple with your whole extractor room built into your super and your frames staying in here. Look at that. We have only honey there and a beautiful piece of comb actually. So we could choose to take that away. We're going to check first. We're shaking the bees off. Make sure we have no brood in the cells. So because there's no brood in there, we could choose to take out that comb, enjoy it on a cheese platter or to your next gathering, or keep it in the fridge for the next time you'd like some honeycomb to show off, and then we can put the frame right back in the middle here. So shaking again, bearing in mind if we tip this right over, the comb might break right out. It's weaker with naturally drawn comb, but we don't need the wax and wire or plastic foundation because we're not putting these frames in a centrifuge, because we've got our own inbuilt honey harvesting system up here with my father and I's Flow Hive invention. Now, it's always hard to get the last bees off, but the bee brush does help. And I don't tend to love the brush, so I tend to do mostly shaking and only brush the last ones off. So that's it there. And it's a good idea to walk away now. If we weren't on camera, I'd walk away a bit further so we've got no bees after this piece of honeycomb. But the basics of it is you can just cut that out and enjoy that honeycomb. Keep the wax for some crafting projects, especially if you've got children. And it's a simple process of cutting down the comb guide. Now this is a little guide that goes in naturally drawn combs, and all you do is that, and this goes straight back in, which to me really beats sitting there late at night wax and wiring and scraping old frames and so on like I used to do. You keep it all in the hive. You cut out the comb right there in the field, and this goes straight back in. It's always best if the bees can look after it. Look at that beautiful comb. That's a really nice show and tell piece as well, with its natural geometry and partially capped. Looks even better. Cheese and blueberries right on there. Away we go.
Yum.
Okay. So this can then go straight back in the middle. Now in the springtime, I'd recommend doing that to a couple of the outer frames. Typically they don't have brood in them. If they do have a little bit of brood left, then you may need to wait till next time, or sometimes we'll put it up under the roof for that brood to emerge for a few days and then and then cut it out and put it back in. However, it's kind of easier if you just seize the moment where there's no brood in the edge frame. And then what you want to do is put that frame back towards the center of the brood nest, which the bees will quickly create some comb there, and the queen will start laying, and you've got a nice fresh piece of real estate for the queen to lay in, and that will really limit that primary swarming trigger. Just like that. It's quite easy to do. And that's part of your spring management. Do it on a frame either side, put those frames back in the middle. That will really help alleviate that swarming trigger. If you want to take it a step further, taking a split is a great idea. As you start to see the numbers really increase, you're looking in the windows, you can hardly see the comb. They're starting to beard out the front. Get ahead of the curve and take 3 or 4 or 5 of these brood frames away, put them in another box, and what you've done is you've split the hive before they've split themselves and limited that swarm taking place. So that's my favourite go-to. It gives you another hive. If you don't want one, somebody else surely will. You can sell that hive, or you can gift that hive to somebody and get them started in the amazing pursuit of beekeeping. Keep the questions coming in. Today we're talking about spring management. We're a bit early here in Australia, but this is one of the techniques, which is freshening up the brood nest with some nice blank frames to really make sure there's space for that queen to lay.
So Greg's getting some conflicting advice. He's in Big Bear City in California, in the USA, about whether he should keep his hive at the 3-degree tilt or only when he's harvesting.
Yes, you'll get that from conventional beekeepers, because we've gone and done things very differently. So it is confusing for people if they're getting a lot of advice locally from conventional beekeeping. So first of all, harvesting directly from the hive is a real change, and the reason why we like it on a 3-degree slope back to the harvesting side, which is best at the back of the hive, because otherwise you're harvesting right over the entrance, which would be complete chaos. So you want to be harvesting on the other side to the entrance, but that means sloping your hive away from the entrance, and that's different to conventional beekeepers who like to slope it towards the entrance, so that if rain comes in and you've just got a conventional flat bottom board, it'll flow out again. So if you've got a conventional flat bottom board and you're sloping it back, then you're potentially pooling water in there, which is not good. So to fix that, as you say, you can just slope it when you're harvested, but that messes up a few other things, so I wouldn't recommend doing that. If you've got a fixed flat conventional bottom board, which is just a piece of wood or tin, then you can still slope your hive back if you drill some holes right at the back underneath for any water that does go in when you've got some driving rain coming in the entrance. It can flow out again, and you don't get that pooling water inside the hive drowning bees. Now, if you've got our Flow Hive base here, we have a screen bottom board, so water will never pool inside the hive where the bees are. So that solves that problem. And we've also sloped the landing board here, so you get less water in the entrance. Now, even with that 3-degree slope backwards, if your hive's not in a situation where you've got driving rain coming in, you generally don't get water coming in the entrance anyway with that sloped landing board. If you're like our hives out here facing the rain that's driving in often from the east, we do get water coming in and going through the screen bottom board into the tray. Not a problem. It's time to wash out your tray anyway, and after a rain event you can just tip out the water in your tray and it won't pool in the hive. Also made it that if you find that annoying, you can flip the tray, there's little drain holes in it, and you won't get water pooling in the tray. So a few options there for you, but it's counterintuitive for conventional beekeepers to tip the hive away from the entrance. But with a Flow Hive you can do that, and you should do that, because that way when you're harvesting, your honey will drain towards your harvesting end, and that will save you messing around trying to get your harvesting angle each time before you harvest. And if you don't have it permanently sloped towards the harvesting side, what you'll find is in here you'll get honey build up from the last time you harvested, and potentially some bees don't seal all the parts so well, and you find honey dripping through as they're actually storing honey as well. And then what you'll find is you'll suddenly tilt the hive back, and there's honey been sitting in here for months, and it could be fermented, so you start your harvest with a whole lot of fermented honey, which isn't good. So what we've done is we've made it so you set your hive up on a permanent slope towards the rear, and that way we have this little leak back point, which you can actually get another view of from this side. It's right there, where if any honey drips through, or you've got honey left over just still trickling through from your last harvest, then it'll go back into the hive for the bees to reuse, rather than get caught up here and potentially get fermented or candied or mucky. So in the short answer, tilt it towards the harvesting side, which is the opposite side to the entrance, on a 3-degree slope. It's so important, we've even bothered to put levels in the hive for you to get that angle right. And we've got it in the side, and we've got it in the rear too, which is great for when you're doing naturally drawn combs, so that you can get the sideways tilt right, so the bees build nice, straight, vertical, naturally drawn comb like you see here.
Right, and so does the wood on the brood frames, does it influence the flavour of the honey in the honeycomb?
No, we don't find the wood influences the flavour, and Western red cedar is really quite a strong aromatic smell as well, and we don't find it actually influences the flavour of the honey. The honey is in wax pockets that the bees create, whether it's in your edges of your brood frame, like that honeycomb we just cut out, or even in your flow frames here, you'll notice that all the cells are very waxy. So your honey's sitting inside beeswax, and the wood won't influence the flavour.
Right. So it's Alexandra's wondering, when you're doing a split, when you know you're keeping the queen in the original hive, should you put 2 frames of eggs and 1 of capped brood in the nuke, or more capped brood and just 1 frame of eggs?
As long as you have eggs in the one without the queen, or if you don't know which one's the queen's in, make sure they both have eggs, then they will likely raise a queen. So it doesn't necessarily have to be multiple frames, but it's often whatever you can find at the time. But capped brood, as you say, is a great resource for that new little colony, because all of those bees, they don't need looking after. They are going to emerge into the hive and start work. So in the next week, they will all emerge, that capped brood, and what you'll find is you'll get a boost in population, which will really help that new little split you've taken on its way to really building up its stores and prospering as a little hive. Now we've got a little bit of rain here. I don't particularly want this beautiful frame of brood to get rain on it, so what I'm going to do is put it back into the hive. Now you could put that on the edge, but I don't particularly want to. This is a nice frame I want to keep for another few cycles. If it was really old and brown, I would put it on the edge, wanting to cycle that out, and that's a great thing to be doing in spring as well. Maybe your old brown one, or dark brown, or black comb to the edge. Wait till there's no brood in it, and then cut that out and put the empty frame back in the middle. Perfect piece of spring management. But that one's just such a nice piece of the brood nest. I'm going to put it back in towards the centre. Bearing in mind we've got a lot of honey here on this next frame as well. Any more questions coming in, just fire away. If you've got answers to other people's questions, it's wonderful to see you really chiming in and helping answer those.
Cedar Carol's asking, what do you do with the honey and the comb from the brood box if you've been treating the hive for varroa with Formic Pro or Bavaro?
Okay, if you're using the organic acids, you can go ahead and chew on the comb, but wait 2 weeks after you've used Formic Pro. So Formic Pro is it's a 2-week acting flash treatment. Wait 2 weeks after you've ceased treatment before harvesting honey. That includes the comb. But you can go ahead with the organic acids. They are things that exist in honey already and exist in a lot of the foods we eat already. So there's not an issue there with chewing on the comb and harvesting your honey later. However, if you're using Bavaro, it's prohibited to use or chew on that comb. So that comb becomes throwaway, if you like. So that's a major drawback of the synthetics, is you'll be throwing away all of those brood combs. You can't chew on it, you can't put it on a cheese platter. You be careful of that. Okay, keep the questions coming in. Hopefully the rain's not too loud. We've got a very rainy day here. We've got an umbrella over our camera rig, which is the side of a beehive with a lot of phones strapped to it.
See, the mould if you've got mould in the flow frames and mould in your brood frames, is that a problem?
Okay, the bees generally do look after their hive, but if they've gotten so weak that they don't have the resources to do so, then as you say, you can get some mould building up. Now if you had old mouldy frames in here on the edges, you could simply cut the wax out and give them another shot at drawing some nice fresh comb. So that would sort out any brood frames. With the flow frames, you can clean them by taking them out after harvest and using a pressure washer to really blast away that old wax. And at will give them a nice freshen up, and you can put them back on again. People find after about 5 to 10 years, a good idea to pull the frames and give them a pressure wash, clean, let them dry and put them back in the hive. If you're doing that, make sure the frames are supported by putting them on a flat surface, leaning down, or leaning them up against a wall such as this as you blast away with your pressure washer, going down the cell lines. Set your frames in open position, and that way the water will flow down and out. If you use hot water, if you can connect your pressure washer to a hot water service, it'll work even better. Now you might want to stand under the shelter here. We can shoot this way if you like, and we can answer a few more questions as we put this hive back together.
Right. Sita, we've got someone who's up on the Gold Coast, which is just up the road, dealing with moisture, seeing as it's raining here and very wet. Just wondering, the bees aren't capping much honey, and they haven't done since February this year. Is this about anything to do with the moisture and the wet weather?
Okay, they're not capping the honey.
Yeah.
And they haven't since February.
Yep.
So I'd say it's just that they don't have enough resources coming in. It's a bit the same here. They're not really producing a lot of honey for us to share in too. They just don't have quite enough of it to complete the cells and really cap a whole lot off. You'll probably find you'll have capped honey down in the brood nest like you see on this frame. Wow, look at that bulging out. I probably was fibbing a little bit there. They really are storing some honey and capping it there, which is good to see. But what you'll find is just around the corner is spring. Let us know what happens, but I would say in the next month your hive will be really storing and capping off a lot of honey in your area. Beautiful, isn't it? Now this is another frame you could potentially take away because there's no brood in it. But we're a bit early here, so I'm not going to take too much away from this little hive. Now this side has some great pollen resources too, which will really aid them in raising their broods. So this is the bee bread. Give us a thumbs up if you can see all the different colours there of their bee bread, which is fermented pollen. They collect the pollen from the flowers in their pollen baskets on their hind legs. They fly back to the hive. They knock off those pollen balls, jam them into the cells with their heads, add their enzyme special sauce, top it with honey and let it ferment into a nice sourdough bee bread, which is the primary food for the young worker bee larvae. So they need that. That's their protein, and they need a good variety of it to stay healthy. So that's really good to see. Very nice.
Nice. Now Chuck's just tuning in and he's asking a question. Yes, Chuck, Tiana is in the office today. I love that. If you don't hear from her, I'll give her a poke when the live's over.
Funny. Okay.
Someone's saying, Sita, they noticed that the bees took all the honey out of the super and have put it all back in the brood box. Any reason as to why they've done that?
Okay, you're probably in your winter here. They potentially have consumed the resources over the winter where there hasn't been enough coming in, and in the springtime, which is just around the corner here, they will really start storing again, assuming your queen's laying a lot of eggs and the population is expanding into spring.
Victor's wondering, Sita, how do you manage with swarms with a hive like this?
Okay, so it sounds like you're used to larger size hives. Now my go-to method is to keep the hive simple, single brood box, single super. That keeps it exceedingly easy to find the queen and do your beekeeping and so on. However, as you say, it could be a drawback, depending on which way you look at it, that the hive might be more likely to swarm because the hive is smaller. So what I tend to do is, as the bees build up, I take splits, and that way you get, in my opinion, more production keeping running the hives a little bit smaller. It's simpler, and you get to increase the size of your apiary as well. However, it's perfectly valid to decide to make a larger size hive, put another brood box or another super. Either one will help limit the chance of your hive from swarming. So that's a great method as well to do your spring management by adding some more space to the hive. And in colder regions, it's very common to have more boxes for more storage, so you've got a good amount of stores there for your hive to survive through the next winter. So very common in those colder regions to go perhaps a double brood box, or some people like to go just a single brood and then an ideal and then the super on top of that. It's really a personal preference, but ask around, see what other beekeepers are doing. Ask here the question, chime in, let us know what you do if you're in a cold region, or what you do in a similar area in terms of the sizing of your hive and how many boxes you're running.
So Gary wants to know, before harvesting, Gary likes to have a quick look at the flow frames just to check that they're all capped and ready to go. But finding it a little bit difficult then, and I think you might have done this last week actually, how then you put the flow frames back into the hive. I think you did a few tips, didn't you, last week on that?
Yes, I can show you that. And well done for getting in and doing your beekeeping. Of course, we've designed the frames so you can get a reasonable idea from the outside, but it's great for your learning to pop flow frames too and have a look and see what's going on, especially if you're unsure whether they're capped all the way through. Now, can we get this in here? It's a bit tight quarters today. Look, we could show you quickly how to do that in a second when I get this brood box back together. I've got some bulgy honey on the edges over here. Okay, there we go. Putting that frame with all that good brood right back in the middle of the brood nest. It's very waxy, and there we go. Making sure you're not pressing comb against other comb or the wall of the hive. Now, your question was getting the last flow frame back in.
Yeah.
So we'll put our excluder back in place like that, and then we're going to close up that hive again, which is easy to do with our lifter, like this. Gives you a very nice controlled way to put your box back on, which is one of the hardest bits. There's not a whole lot of bees there, so I can close that up, but if there was, I could seize that moment to really get the bees out of the way. And that's it, your brood inspection's done. With our lifter, it makes it very easy. Now, in terms of the flow frames, we're going to pop this lid off here, and I'll show you quickly how to go about getting that last frame in. Once you get used to it, it will be easy. I just got a little bit of an issue over here. Okay. So, first of all, in order to take out a frame, we'll go through that first. You remove the back window, and there is 3 lifting points. So here, here, and over here. And then you can pull that frame up. And we can see they're storing some nice honey there, which is fantastic. Beautiful, look at that. Really good to see the spring starting here. Not today though, on this very rainy day. Now, the tip to getting it back in is actually to first of all lean it on an angle like this towards your harvesting end. The reason why I'm doing that is that's maintaining the space between the two frames. If I was to have it out like this, you're going to get this funny overlap which can get annoying. So you're leaning it this way just a bit to make sure you're holding the space as you put it down. And that way, if you keep it leaning against this face, there's no way these frames can close in. And then you go down like that, maintaining it being pushed towards this. If I let it drop back, then you can see that overlap there, which could be annoying. If that happens, come up again. You're keeping your space, that's it, as you drop it down. And well done, B, you got out of the way, watch that point there. And that's it, you've got your nice formed face. The other one is at the back here, we've got these screws, and you can wind them out to push the frames forward in this direction, or you can just push them forward and let them get nice and waxy, and you don't tend to have to use that. Okay, we're going to wind up here. It's raining a lot now, so thank you very much for all of your great questions, and thanks for chiming in and helping answer everyone's questions in the thread as well. Same time next week, tune in and we'll have another show and tell for you. Thanks for watching. Catch you again, same time next week.